record.
Yeah, we did. I wanted the first part. So you chipped your tooth.
First 30 seconds.
We're killing it, man.
This
So how'd you
pastor's
chip your tooth?
unqualified. I chipped my tooth through a CrossFit workout. So I don't remember what all the movements were, but one of them was a clean and jerk, not a snatch,
Okay.
but with a barbell. So from the floor, you go from like a deadlift to a squatting position to the bars right here, and then the jerk part or the press part, you go up overhead, and you're supposed to go as fast as possible. And the dudes I was working out with were all pretty competitive, and so I was looking at them, not really paying attention, and I didn't move my head back enough when I went up, and sure enough, just shot it straight up into my chin. And I mean, I could taste the tooth particles in my mouth,
That shattered?
like
That,
I was eating sand. Yeah.
What, did you finish the workout?
Yeah.
Did you just spit it out or did you swallow it?
Partly both.
You're like a little bit of protein.
A
Let's go.
little bit of both. Yeah.
God.
Swallow and spit.
What did the dentist say?
Spit and swallow. I haven't gone to a dentist since probably 7th, 8th grade.
Are you kidding me?
I haven't had insurance, man.
Bro, we got a great smile.
Thank you.
Did you have braces growing up or anything?
No, this is literally like Katie and I were just talking about this.
Hold on. You tell me your front row teeth look that good and you never had anything done?
You know?
Dude, here
They're getting yellow.
I'm Gap Central over here.
Yeah, I love you, man.
Okay, here's what I
Michael
figured
Strahan.
out. Here's what I figured out the yellow. Yeah.
This is the bottom, though, isn't it?
I got a little field goal post in the front of my face. Did you know I have to use thick floss? I hit $2 bill for the middle spot. It is, yeah.
It's like fishing line for sharks. That looked
Just
good.
using the tooth. That's great.
Man.
I can whistle good, though.
I bet.
It's pretty
Yeah,
good, bro.
it's
It is. Zions getting old enough now. He's noticing
I'm
like
already getting red.
my imperfections. And yesterday he was like, "What's that?" And I was like, "That's Dad's Gap, son." I was like, "That's what it is." He'll probably ask me if I used to have a tooth there.
I love that about kids, man.
Oh, they're
like,
so good.
There was we were just chatting with some friends back home with kids, and like that innocent age period. I don't know when it stops. Maybe, I don't know, 9, 8, 9.
Yeah.
But just their raw honesty, man.
Yeah.
Like I remember friends back in Springfield when I had acne really bad. Their little kid would just like call me out on it and like, dude, what's that? All that white stuff on your face? And you know, they would be like, I'm really sorry about our kid. But I love that honesty.
Kids are great, dude.
They
Well, I
are.
think it's because like there's no behind the scene thing they're trying to do. There's no like
Yeah.
secret shade or like they're just like curious. They're like, hey,
Yeah.
what is this? You know?
And they're not necessarily concerned about how they're coming off yet.
Yeah.
They don't even
and they
know.
don't care.
Yeah.
Like they don't care that you had acne. They're like, oh, okay. You still want to play?
Yeah. Yeah, we still ate pizza that night.
Yeah. Life is
Drank
like
Red
still
Bull
good.
and had a great time,
Dude.
and I wasn't offended. It was funny.
Dude, it's a good day. I
yeah.
love it, bro. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm glad you're here. Thanks for coming through.
Yeah,
Chat.
man.
How long have we been friends now? Best
I don't know. I
friends,
knew you were
dear
going to ask me
friends.
that question.
Yeah, you did.
So I was thinking about it. I think I went to James River in 2015, 2014.
Yo, we're getting close to a decade, though.
I know, dude. Because I graduated in 2013 high school.
The Big Ten.
Went to Evangel for a semester, and then, whatever season of life I was in, and then came to LC.
Yeah.
Either 2014, 2015, graduated 2016. So in there, 7, 8 years.
Dude,
that we've known each other.
Crazy. We've been that long, and so much life that we've lived together, which is like insane to think about. Wow.
Yeah.
I think you're one of my oldest friends, which is wild. I went through a radical transition from high school to college, like lost a lot of friends and mentors and leaders, like all that stuff. So I like rebuilt all that. So it's weird for me to have friends like through longevity. So anyways, that's what's the joy of this though. Cause like with the podcast, it's like, hey, I want to have my friends come out. So it's like, dude, you're in the area. Let's go. You're about to fly out. Where you going? You're going to Colorado.
Going to Denver, fly out tomorrow morning super early. Shout out to you for waking up super early to take me to the airport.
You got me
I know.
10 years ago. I got you now.
Yeah, I'm paying in those favors right now. So August, you
IOU.
came in clutch. Yeah, the IOUs. Yeah. August, you came in clutch for Katie and I for vacation, and
Look
then
at that.
flying out tomorrow morning to go out there for 5 days to work with an organization out there called Denver Dream Center. So they'll be doing some outreach stuff while I'm out there, and
Cool.
I'll be leading a team in March to serve with them. So that's why
cool.
I'm going out there.
So
Yeah.
dive in. Tell me what you do. So you do community work, you do missions work, revitalization, like so much stuff.
Yep.
So dive into it.
So I work at a church about 2 hours north of here in a little town called Stuart, Florida. Never heard of it before we moved. The only frame of reference that we had of Florida was you and Miami. and knew quickly that we did not want to live in Miami
Missing out, man.
or be in Florida. But here we find ourselves.
But God.
So,
but God.
Yeah.
He's got a big butt with your name on it.
He does. And he keeps throwing those butts in there, man. So,
but it's good.
Yeah.
I'm taking your story, sorry.
No, you're good.
So what do you do there?
Yeah, so we've been there for a year now. Official titles, life groups and missions pastor. So really help people who are new to the church take their next steps in finding community, answer questions, grabbing coffees, lunches, and dinners with anybody who wants to hang out and learn more about the church and find community. Starting life groups, helping leaders, discipleship, but then anything related to our community and our backyard with local partners that we have, serving shoulder to shoulder with them and making a difference in Martin County, which is where the church is at, and then missions. And so kind of our approach to that is instead of going wide, we want to go deep. And so we work with one church, one pastor in Honduras and go there year over year. And that's been an amazing experience.
That's
And
cool.
So they're actually coming up to our church tomorrow to pick some stuff up to take back to Honduras.
Dude, that's sweet.
Yeah.
And you guys, you were just telling me before we turn this on, you're building a water well right now, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so building a water well for them, which water over there is essential. They have a river. It's about a 45-minute to an hour walk, depending where you're at in the village, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's clean. And so being able to provide water, clean water, to the community will be like literally life-changing. But with our involvement with the church there, Pastor Julio and the church that he leads, we've seen the life expectancy literally grow in that community.
Really?
Since we've been working with them.
Wow.
So that's been really cool.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
See, that's what I love about you is you've always been a huge community guy, like creating those spaces, but then also creating pathways for people to have like life and life to the fullest. So now you're doing that where people literally physically get more life.
Yeah.
No pun intended, like literally what you're doing.
Yeah.
But there's so many people that we know and that you encounter that have a lot of years but don't have a lot of life, or they don't live life well, but you create spaces for that, which I love. Has that always been you? Have you always been like that, like ever since you were little and young? Or like how did you begin to care about other people so deeply?
That's a good question. I would say yes and no. So there are like moments that come to my mind in this moment about childhood, like a guy named Justin Case and a baseball team that I was on when I was a kid. This is like elementary school. And he was newer to the team. We already had like an established team and a friend group within that. And then kind of your tight friend group, like this is our gang or our group of friends. And so Justin was new and he came on, and honestly, he was not a good baseball player. He was not a good addition to the team.
Shout out to Justin Case. A bad case.
I wonder what he's doing with his life. He's probably like farming and
Not playing baseball.
living his dream in Missouri or something. But yeah, he was not a good addition to the team. And I remember, even though I was part of like the in group when he came onto the team, like even though he wasn't a good addition talent-wise, I still wanted to include him. And I felt bad and noticed that he wasn't connected to the baseball team. And so went out of my way to like try to become friends with him and get him plugged in. And so I have memories and moments of that come to mind in wanting to be an includer, which on the Strengths Finder test that I took back in college, includer is one of my strengths. And so seeing people and identifying ways to connect with them, I would definitely say was there naturally sometimes as a kid, but then as I grew up, predominantly in high school before knowing Jesus, less and less of that, and it was more about me and my friends and what I wanted, to where I didn't really care about people. And so cultivating that didn't really come after meeting Jesus and starting to follow him, and then kind of that path that it took me on.
Yeah.
But as a kid, I'd say naturally before you kind of, at least for me, getting more and more away from God and what he cares about and following my passions and desires as a young kid, I could see it, but definitely wasn't cultivated until later on in life when I became an adult. Yeah.
So, growing up as a kid, like explain the dynamic, your family dynamic, the town you grew up in.
Yeah.
Because that's going to lead to my second part, but I think there's a lot of colorful context there we need.
Yeah. So, I was born in Illinois.
And you may be good, but move the mic a little closer.
Okay.
I feel like I need to say that.
So, I was born in Illinois in a place called Woodstock, and then was flown to Rockford, had a collapsed lung. They didn't think I was going to survive, and then we lived there until about kindergarten. My parents were married at the time, trying to keep their marriage together. but not going into too many details, we were facing some pretty significant challenges. And so they wanted a change. Therefore, we moved to Missouri, which is where I spent all of my childhood and went through first grade to senior year, graduating high school there. So most of my childhood and developmental years were spent in this tiny town called Salem, Missouri, which I'm pretty sure had more cows than people. It was like a town of 3,000. But there, my parents were hoping to keep the marriage together by moving to get away from my dad's side of the family, which were pretty party hardy people and substance abuse and alcohol addiction and angry alcoholics, to where I think it was causing more problems in their marriage, but then also in their careers as well. They were having some challenges, and so they moved to Missouri, try to change the environment. That didn't really work out. We tried religion, we tried church. That didn't really help. Parents got divorced when I was super young, so I was raised by my mom, my sister, who's 7 years older than me. We had a terrible relationship growing up. I love my mom, and she did the best that she could, but being the only dude in the house, I kind of went off on the deep end and did my own thing. Got really heavy into sports, basketball primarily, to where that became my identity and where I found a lot of validation and value. But yeah, that was kind of the environment that I grew up in. Semi-dysfunctional family, divorce. And then actually my grandparents retired early from Illinois, mom's side. So her parents and my grandpa stepped into that father figure role for a while, was diagnosed with ALS, and then died a year after being diagnosed. And so having an absent dad who's never really been a role model or somebody that I would call if I'm having challenges or facing a decision or just needing some guidance, and then my grandpa stepping in and trying to be that, and then him passing away was super difficult. And then just growing up in primarily a female house with no male presence. Didn't notice it in the moment, but looking back now in hindsight, definitely had a negative impact in the way that I acted and things that I thought about. So yeah, that's kind of the environment and the setting in which I grew up.
Yeah. You describe a context, that's what most people grow up in. I mean, we know studies say it and everything, but most people you talk to, friends or everything, single parent household, most time dads aren't around, parents context, and I think you said something key. I didn't realize at the time, but it did shape my life moving forward. Yeah. And there's a lot of good things, obviously, your mom brings to the table. There's a lot of things like, obviously, I know that we've talked about that a bunch, but also too, there's things that put you in a deficit. And I think all of us growing up, because no family's perfect, no unit, doesn't matter both or not, but all of us come to the table of adulthood with deficits. And it's interesting how we try to fill that with certain things. And for you, it was sports. It was like identity. It was like athlete, and you were good, really good at basketball. I have shown you up a few times.
No, you haven't. That's not true.
We'll get to that.
Delete that. That's falsehood, bro.
I know I irritate you on the basketball court. Yeah. So anyways, back to it. So just a couple times I beat him though. But anyways, so this is the part of the story though that gets really unique for me, and I want to lean in because it's like where I met you. So you're playing basketball, you graduate, you're going to get a scholarship where you get to go live out your identity dream. Yeah. But then you encounter God, and God's like, hey, give that up. Yeah. So talk about that. How did that actually happen? Because that derailed your plans quickly.
Yeah. So my view of God was definitely based off of my view of my father and having a father wound. And John Eldridge, author, counselor, super famous book, Wild at Heart, talks about this fig leaf that most men use or have to cover up their shame or their guilt or that wound. So for me, that was sports, and I had an unhealthy attachment to it for identity, validation, friends. But then also that quickly led to, because of my abilities on the court to perform, and because I was in such a small town in the middle of nowhere in Missouri, if you had any bit of talent, you got recognition for that and a lot of opportunity just to do what you're good at. And so I used that to my advantage as I was developing in high school on and off the court. But yeah, so I had my view of God growing up was either he is powerful but doesn't care, because my parents got divorced. My dad's not around. The guy who moved and retired early to take care of us died. Wow. So if there is a God out there that is powerful, he obviously doesn't care about us. Or if there is a God that cares, he's not powerful to do anything because look at our situation. Yeah. And so we go to church a little bit, but really after my parents' divorce, we didn't go too much or anything that I would remember that was meaningful or significant to me. That by the time I was somewhat independent, meaning I had a driver's license, I was in high school, I had some freedom. And my mom, gave me a lot of freedom to kind of do whatever I wanted to do. I wasn't going to church or interested in being invited to youth group or anything like that. I actually made fun of a lot of kids back in high school for being Christian and going to youth group and things like that. And so, yeah, my view of God was maybe he's out there, but he doesn't care about me. And I'm kind of doing my own thing, and I found something that I'm really good at. So I'm just going to keep doing this and do what I want in life. And so that led me up to, like you mentioned, being able to have an opportunity to go play basketball in college, in track. But then also I was quickly developing a bad reputation for having off-court behavior or antics. I had to write an apology letter to a rivalry school because of a chant that we had the student body create about a player that we were playing against, and a couple of tweets. At that time, Twitter and social media is we had it, but our parents didn't have it yet. Yeah. And so we thought we could just say whatever we want, would never get in trouble. Mm-hmm. And then schools became aware of what we were saying online, and then colleges became aware of okay, this kid has talent, but he's an issue and can be an issue for our school. Yeah. And so a lot of colleges would come and watch me, but then I would never really get an offer. But I had a couple schools, St. Louis University, one of them, who extended an offer, and I was planning to go play for them. And then senior year, a couple pivotal moments or experiences, one with my best friend since kindergarten. His name was Hunter, who was he was my best friend, so everything that we did, we did together, and a lot of things that we would do in a town like Salem, there wasn't much to do, so we were getting into a lot of trouble. And again, we were beginning to build a reputation in our town for being people that you probably shouldn't spend a lot of time with unless you want to get in trouble. On our prom night, actually, senior year, we're at prom, we're doing our thing, and he's in the corner, not engaging in the normal activity that we'd usually spend a Friday night doing. And so went up to him and asked him hey, what's going on? He seemed a little off, and he kind of responded to me of man, if this is all that there is, I'm kind of tired of it. I can't keep doing this every weekend. There's got to be more. I remember him saying there's got to be more to life than this. And after that moment, we kind of separated for a while, and we graduated high school, went into summer. We were all getting ready to go to college, on to our next thing. Haven't seen him. I was continuing to do what I was doing, preparing and working out to potentially go play at that college. Yeah. And I was actually at a workout getting ready for school, and Hunter gives me a call. And he's like, hey, man, I know that we haven't really talked recently, and since prom night, kind of the last time that we spoke, I've kind of gone on this journey of discovering that answer to the question that I mentioned to you that night. So there's got to be more to life than this. And I think I found it. It's actually in Jesus. And I've been going to the church that my mom sings on the worship team and works at. And the church that was is Assemblies of God Pentecostal Church. And so if we ever went to church, which was not often, it was a Baptist church. and Hunter and his family, they were rich. They had the coolest house. They had a swimming pool. He had the best video games growing up. His place was the place to hang.
Dude, the kid with the best video games.
Yeah, dude. We would play GoldenEye on Nintendo 64.
GoldenEye. Did you do the big head,
man.
the big head power up?
Oh yeah.
You'd run around. You have the friend that didn't know. He tried to hide behind a wall. And it's his head just sticking up.
Yeah, so good,
man. It's great.
But yeah, his place was the place to be, and his parents were incredible. But knowing that was the church that they went to consistently, I would always pretend to be sick because their rule was if you stay with us over the weekend, you stay the night on Saturday, you got to go to church with us on Sunday. So I'd call my mom like after midnight. Oh, Mom, I'm so sick. I can't stay here. I just want to come home. Like, would you please come pick me up? Because I did not want to go to their church. It freaked me out. So that was the church that he started going to. That was the church that his mom led worship at. And so he called me and he's like, man, I've been kind of on this journey and I think Jesus is real and I'm a Christian. Like, I'm following him, been reading the Bible with my mom and asking a lot of questions, and just makes a lot of sense. And, like, this is what God has done in my life since that moment. And so I kind of, like, pushed it off in the moment. I was like, man, I'm busy. I'm just wrapping up a workout. Like, why are you calling me? What do you need? And he's like, well, I went to this thing called Revival last night at our church, and this was my experience. And in that moment, even though I'm hesitant to share it with you because I think you're going to think it's stupid or crazy or whatever. I feel like I need to invite you tonight. It's happening again tonight, and you should come with me. And I put the phone down to go back to wrap up what I was doing. And I remember putting the phone down, like, I'm missing out on something if I don't call him back to go. Yeah. And so I gave him a call back, and I said, what time is it at, and what do I need to wear? And so me, him, and our other best friend named Lane, we all three went together that night. And so went, and again, charismatic setting and environment. So there were a lot of things culturally in that kind of environment that I just didn't understand or get that went over my head. A lot of yelling, a lot of shouting, a lot of sweating. And I was just confused by the whole experience.
Sounds like a revival night. Give me a couple modesty claps and we're about to have a good time.
Yeah, and like anointing oil, which I thought I just had no idea. Like, I had no frame of reference for what was going on. And the preacher was
Did you have any poured on you?
I didn't. No, thankfully, like, people were really...
You said thankfully.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because it make you run away.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into that yet, but we'll come back to that. That's
good. I don't know how I would have responded.
Yeah,
but, like, when I remember walking in, and again, it's a super small town, so even though you feel like you're somebody, it's in the context of, like, everyone knows everybody in their story. But I remember walking into that church, and people's eyes were like, that's Chad, Elliot, Lane, and Hunter. What are they doing here? Like, felt like a big deal, but everyone kind of left us alone. They were kind of confused on like why they here and what are they doing? And so, like, I don't remember what the pastor said. There wasn't a moment in time that I felt like through the message that, like, God spoke to me or had like this emotional encounter or experience. But by the end of it, I was sitting in this really uncomfortable wooden pew alone because they had like an altar call or a response time to where people went forward, and my two buddies went forward. And so I was left alone, just sitting there, and I, like, leaned over, head down, didn't want anybody to come put their hand on my shoulder, pray for me, or, like, touch me. I was just like, I want this to be over and done. And in that moment, as close to, like, an audible voice that I've experienced, started asking me questions. Who would you be if you didn't have basketball? If basketball was no longer part of your story, what would you do? And I just remember responding like, I don't know who I would be, and I don't know what I would do without that. And I remember in that moment feeling like a voice spoke to me audibly to like you and I talking, and it was just me. Like, I looked around because I was a little confused. Like, is somebody trying to have a conversation with me of follow me and let me show you what I can do. And that was it. And I said, okay, God, if you're real and Jesus is who he says he is, I'm going to give you my life. I will give you a shot. I will try this out. And so thankfully, before I left that night, the youth pastor, who ended up becoming a best friend to me, discipling me, helping me study the Bible, answered a lot of my questions, but was also just like a cool dude that you could hang out with and wasn't weird, and had a very similar story in how he got saved and delivered from a lot of the things that I developed an addiction and was abusing substances and alcohol at that time, and even had stuff on me. And at that time, like that night, I was planning to go to a party that evening. And so him and I connected. He was like, let me help you. And he became a best friend. But then that night, since I didn't have like an emotional experience or an encounter, but that voice speaking to me, I went home to my sister's place, who's older than me, and her place for us became kind of the party place. And we had stuff in the fridge, and again, was ready to have a party that night and the night after. And I went home and talked to her, and I was standing in the kitchen near the sink, and she came up to me, asked me what I was doing, and I said, "You're not gonna believe this, but I think I became a Christian tonight, and I think I'm going to follow Jesus." And she said, "You're an idiot, and we'll see how long that lasts."
Wow.
And that was it, and she walked away. But I knew in me, like, if I'm going to follow Jesus and he's real, I got to stop doing what I'm doing. And it wasn't like a guilt thing. It was more like a conviction thing. Like, desires were beginning to change, and it was more of something like happening to
really
me
good.
than me like consciously saying,
Yeah.
"Oh, because I follow Jesus now, that means I can't cuss, I can't drink, I can't smoke, I can't do what I was doing." It was
You
just
had
like,
a new longing.
I don't
It's
want to
like,
do
yeah.
it anymore.
That's
I like
cool.
I want to read my Bible and hang out with this Dylan guy that I barely know and pray for my friends who are lost, who are out on that farm tonight doing what I was doing.
Yeah.
But I don't want to do anymore. So I remember taking all this beer in the fridge that we had and started dumping it out in the sink. And from that moment, have definitely gone through the highs and lows and seasons of growing and becoming more like Jesus, hopefully. But from that moment, became a follower of Jesus, and since then, it's been an interesting adventure and journey and
Dude, let's go.
experience.
Dude, so good. Man, there's so much there.
Yeah,
to
sorry,
talk
that's a
through.
lot, man.
No, don't be sorry. That's
Yeah.
why we're here. And it's your story. And there's more to it. I mean, every
I was trying to keep it PG as much as possible.
That's all right, bro. It's the pod. You can do whatever you want. It's crazy how every story is so intimate and so unique, yet there's common threads intertwined.
Yeah.
And part of that is because the theological realities that you see, but also part of that is the dynamic of following the rabbi, which Jewish history you have to understand. And then the other part of it is how God works on a psychological level, also as a spiritual level. Because like the moment you started pouring out beer, it's not because you're like, oh, beer's bad.
Yeah.
But for you, it became this isn't my master anymore. And you didn't even know. Like, you're living out. For you, you're like demonstrating on the outside what you're doing on the inside. You're like, yo, I'm not doing this anymore. Now I'm like contemplating basketball. It's like I think I may be. And it's crazy how God is literally doing scripture in you and you don't know it. He's giving you a new heart and a new mind.
Yeah.
And so now it's like, I have a new love.
Yeah.
And so I now long for a different love. I long for a different affection, a different desire. And it's immediate. You know, that's that encounter with God. And it doesn't just happen when you go to an altar. I'm always down for an altar. I'm going to go. I love it. But you're literally in the wooden pew by yourself. And you encounter all of creation through the Creator. And in that moment, it's like, and I love when people talk about the audible voice, because it makes me think in Psalms where it's like, in deep cries out to deep. It's because all of a sudden, the deepness of God cries out to the deepness in you, and you go, wow, I'm home.
Yeah.
Like, that's the decibel I didn't know I could speak at.
Yeah.
That's the functioning I didn't even know I was capable of. And, like, you hit that decibel, and you're like, yo, the world's different now.
Yeah.
Like, life
It's like
is,
I was seeing black and white, now
Yeah.
I'm seeing color.
color and,
Yeah.
like, interstellar. It's, like, there. And you're like,
Yeah.
dude, I've tasted and seen God is good. And it's like, it's no longer like I gotta behave. It's like I must be with him. I must follow my rabbi. I must be so close that the dirt of his feet is on me.
Yeah.
You know, and it's so great. But I think one of the things that I just love what you said when you were talking about the Pentecostal church was that it was weird. But when you went, the people didn't let the weirdness get you. You know, they kind of helped contextualize it, and I think the church always has to remember the language that they use and the experiences that they create. First, they need to make sure they're speaking in a language that's not Christian, but it's human.
Yeah.
Because we all speak a human language.
Right.
We all have our human tendencies. And we enter the environment with that before we understand the Christian culture.
Yeah.
And so speaking in a language of that, but then also experiences like giving context. So that's like anytime we do communion, that's why I always explain communion.
Yeah.
If we have someone speak in tongues, I'm always giving some understanding.
Yep.
Because then what happens is you have someone pray for you or someone from a mic, and they're like, we pray that the blood of the lamb will be upon you, the hedge of protection. And you're like, the blood of an animal and like a magical bush. And it's like, this is a cult, you know? And it's like, yeah, we are. But how do you not become a cult? You just explain the culture. And that's what church leaders have to do. They have that response. You have the responsibility to explain it.
Yeah.
And the Holy Spirit's not just going to farm it out. It's not like when you gave your life to the Lord, it's like, and now I understand all the churchisms.
Right.
It's like, no, you had to go on the journey, you know? And that's why discipleship, like walking with Dylan, was like so important. So let's go to the point now. You had a point, it's like, hey, you got a scholarship, go play basketball, but then also God's like, hey, I have something else.
Yeah.
Tell me that part.
Yeah, so you're talking about new desires, new longings, new love, and kind of living out Scripture before you know it. And that was my experience. I don't think that's more of a description of my experience than a prescription, you know. But then having a frame of reference of actually going through the Scriptures was now being able to give me a language and an understanding of my experience, kind of what you're talking about earlier, and having Dylan there to help me understand the new environment, the new culture that I was kind of stepping into, the new friends, because I lost all my friends for a while after that, and living in my mom's basement and wondering what the heck am I going to do. And so to that new longing, new desire, new love, I wanted to start serving at the church and being with Dylan and being a new Christian. I basically just wanted to be Dylan, and he was a youth pastor, and so that gave me a heart for ministry. And through different experiences during that summer, knew that, like, okay, if I want to continue to follow Jesus and whatever that means and looks like, I know that I can't hold on to what I was doing previously or be surrounded by the kind of dudes that were my friends originally. If I want to play this long game, like, I'll probably slip back into what I'm used to, but I don't want to. And so that kind of had me in a predicament because, honestly, my sister thought I was an idiot, like she mentioned that night when I started pouring out all the beer. And then my mom was just really confused. And like I said, she gave me a lot of freedom in high school.
Yeah.
And I abused that freedom and I abused her trust. And there was a point leading up to that point where I experienced Jesus and gave my life to him that I came home one night really intoxicated, and that was the first time that she saw me drunk and in a really bad shape. Like, just nasty stuff.
Bad.
Yeah, just a bad. It was
game, set, match.
It was a bad trip. It was a bad night. Terrible experience. Like waking up in my own vomit kind of stuff.
Oh.
And so she saw me in that, and she knew it conceptually. She knew that was happening, but didn't actually see it physically.
Yeah.
And so seeing her son like that, I remember her looking at me and saying, "I love you. And you have so much potential in the future in front of you and what you're being offered to do, and you're literally just throwing it away. You're giving it up." And that's so sad to see that I think I'm done. I don't know what to do with you anymore. Wow. And then like a month and a half later, I go to church and end up giving my life to Jesus. And so she was just overwhelmingly disoriented and confused about what the heck is going on with my son.
Yeah.
And what I put her through up into that moment. So when I became a follower of Jesus, her and her boyfriend at the time, my mom was more confused and her boyfriend was just like skeptical. Like, he's playing a trick on you. He's pretending to go to church. He's pretending to be a good kid so that he can continue doing what he was doing previously. Yeah. And so there's a long game to that, to where like your character plays out over years and time.
It's not true as a kid. It's true as an adult too.
100%.
Yeah.
Like,
so many facets of life.
Your actions speak louder than what you say sometimes.
Yep.
Over time. And that was something that Dylan helped me. He's like, you're not going to win because I caused a lot of damage relationally and emotionally to a lot of people in that small town during my time that I was there. That he's like, people aren't just going to forgive you because you follow Jesus now.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to do the hard work. And he kind of introduced me to the 12 steps that are very common in recovery circles, in making amends and asking for forgiveness and repairing relationships. And you see that straight from Scripture. Yeah. You know? But yeah, so my mom was just like really confused and disoriented about who I am and who I was becoming. And she, in a good way, that you have hopes and dreams for your kids, she knew that I loved basketball, and that was my way out. And that was my perceived way out of getting out of Salem and making a life for myself, was I'm going to go play college basketball, I'm going to go play overseas, and then I'm going to coach and build a career so that I don't ever have to come back here and live in Salem, Missouri. I don't ever want to be back here again. And so now I'm coming home and saying, I'm following Jesus. I'm hanging out with this guy named Dylan, who's a youth pastor at a church in Salem, and I'm serving on a volunteer basis with him because I want to be a youth pastor, I think. But then also I'm driving 28 miles to Rolla, Missouri to work at JCPenney, and I'm not going to go play college basketball anymore. I'm actually going to live in your basement so I can continue to volunteer at this church and work at a retail store that, like, I don't understand why hasn't JCPenney closed down yet?
Yeah.
Like, how is JCPenney still
And your mom's
opening?
thinking, Jesus actually may be worse than the beer.
100%. Like, she was just, like, I remember her telling me, like, I don't know what the heck that you're doing, but you need to figure it out, and I don't know if this is it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you living in my basement saying that you want to be a pastor is
Oh,
it for
man.
you. Like, what are you doing, you
Dude,
know?
Let's pause right there.
Yeah.
It's so unique that people that don't have faith language, don't have faith perspective, desire a certain outcome, and then they express that to the people that don't have faith.
Yeah.
Then those people encounter Jesus and they start living a life with the outcome that they talked about, but then what comes after that, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, hold on a second, because most people when they want a different outcome, it's like, hey, I don't want this, so instead I want it to be this. It's like, it's either on or off. So I'd rather have it on than off. But that's not how life works. Once you turn something on, it's a journey. You know, it's like Lord of the Rings. It's like, okay, and the hobbits take off to Mordor. But there's like 1,000
And you have all
paths
these
along
different
the way.
stages.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
So people are like, hold on a second. Because when you give your life to Jesus, hook, line, sinker, and you're like, yo, let's go, Rabbi. Like, I'm following you. You sign up for the adventure of a lifetime.
Yep.
But also, it's an intimate adventure. And some of the intimacy is kept in here. And like Mary, you just ponder in your heart. But then that comes in an outward context. And that's when people that don't have faith are like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
You know? So how for you did you not get derailed from the derailed Jesus life you were living?
Yeah, that's honestly a great question. Like, Dylan was a huge part in my life, and he kind of helped me discover.
Shout out to Dylan.
Yeah,
dude.
man. I was actually just thinking about him like last week.
That's cool.
But he like gave me a roadmap, or like a map forward, and so he was the one that suggested me going to Bible college. He's like, hey, if you really want to be a pastor and do full-time ministry, which for me, like I said, I had some experiences after following Jesus. One of them being I felt like God spoke to me pretty clearly, like, you're going to be in full-time ministry. It wasn't you're going to be a youth pastor, you're going to be a lead pastor, you're going to church plant, you're going to be a missionary. It wasn't that specific like some of my friends have had. It was just, I feel like what I'm called to do is work at a church, whatever that means. And that's taken different forms over the last, been following Jesus. And that was in 2013, July 23rd, 2013, when I had that moment at the church. So it's been about a little over 10 years now, right? We're in 2023.
Yeah.
So Dylan like helped give me a vision for what could be my future and suggested Bible college and like, hey, if you want to be a pastor, you actually need to go to school and be educated on this and learn and get in a different environment. So having him as a friend, once I became a little bit more comfortable in that environment, in that church, like older people became parents to me and brought me in. Peers that I used to make fun of, like a guy named Zach Irway. He was actually a year younger than me. He was on our basketball team, and I used to make fun of him all the time for being a Christian. And he'd tell me, like, man, I'm just praying for you. Like, I believe God's going to do great things in your life. And I'd be like, shut up. Leave me alone. Like, I don't want to talk to you.
I will dunk on you.
And then I remember, yeah, he was shorter too, so I easily could do that. But, like, I ended up spending time with him at his house with his parents.
Wow.
Like just talking about my future and praying for my friends. So like I had new friends, even though I was losing the friend group that I had for the last 3 or 4 years, or that I even grew up with from childhood, because they continued going to college, going on their own path. Even Hunter and Lane left. Like it was cool to see how God brought in a new community and new relationships and new friends to help me not get off or derailed, like you mentioned earlier. So I could just see him working in the sense of like, hey, I'm giving you a new vision for your life, but I'm also going to bring community into your life and friendships and relationships at different levels and stages to help you. So people shoulder to shoulder who have same desires or passions as you, like a Zachary Way. He's in full-time ministry right now doing awesome stuff. So have a guy that you can walk with, and like a Dylan who's a couple years down the road to help you show you what you could be in 5 to 10 years. And then like these older figures, parent figures, even grandparent figure. Shout out to Grandma Sherry at the church in Salem. But she's like everyone's grandma.
Like Sherry's Berries, that grandma?
I don't know what Sherry's Berries
Sherry's
is.
Berries is like Valentine's Day. You can get strawberries.
Okay,
We'll just
maybe.
say it's her. That sounds good. Shout out to Grandma Sherry's Berries.
But she's incredible. She's like everyone's grandma. And so like
That's
I
so
just
cool.
had people in different stages
Yeah.
of life to help show me, all right, you have someone to do this with.
Yeah.
This is who you can become. And like the long game of 20, 30, 40 years of a life well lived. So I felt like just God was giving me a vision, was giving me relationships to help me stay focused on what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I think part of it too was like just deep down, I just had like a conviction. I knew that this is what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so dealing with confusion from my mom, animosity and anger, and like just basically being called a phony by my mom's boyfriend, and then my friends who were leaving, like, hey man, if you're not gonna do what, like, the reason why we're friends, or part of the reason why we're friends, is because we do this together.
Yeah.
And you're saying you no longer want to do that, but you're reading your Bible and praying for us, and telling us that there's more to life than what we're doing. Like, we're not in on that. So see ya. And it was just a weird transitional phase because high school was over. So we're all stepping into adulthood and going on to the next stage to where you just kind of, you lose friends naturally in that.
It's that unique season everyone goes through.
Yeah.
And I think adults sometimes can downplay that, but it's one of the most defining times in people's lives. And I don't think they give enough credit and value to it, because it shapes who you are, good or bad.
Yeah.
And some people like develop extreme wounds from that. They feel like, oh, I was lost. Some people are fine, but there's a lot there.
Yeah.
You know, it's unique. The moment you give your life to Jesus, he puts you in a community to literally collaborate, do life with people, get engaged. And the key to your success in that season, and still, is like you stayed in community. You know, I think so many Christians, when they first give their life to Jesus, they're on fire, which is great. The key, though, to stay on fire is like stay in community. You know, like I've been on fire. I mean, I gave my life to the Lord when I was 5. I was at a youth gathering. I was at a baseball field. I'm playing with my dad in the aisles, and the pastor was like, "Hey, you want to give your life to Jesus?" And I stop, and I remember the moment. I was like, "Yeah, I probably need to do that." And I give my life to the Lord. Since then, it's been a journey for me.
Yeah.
But since that day, I'm lit, bro. Like, let's go, Lord, and everything. And I've gone through heaven, I've gone through hell in a handbag, but I'm still here.
Yeah.
But the reason I'm still here is because I'm in community. And I think what happens is, Christians, it reminds me of, you remember the goat, that we see on the memes, where it's the goat that's like, yeah! Remember that one? It literally, so I think about how we're sheep, and what happens is you get Christians, they get so pumped, they're like, yeah! And they run away from the flock, and they're like, I'm the shepherd now, and they take off, and they're going, and then they feel good, they feel confident. They get to their little green pasture, they're doing whatever, they see a new mountain view, and they're up on the hill, they're like, look at me, I'm this solo sheep. But the problem is, it goes bad really quick, and here's why. Hebrews talks about this. Let us encourage one another. Let us spur one another forward. Pick your scripture. But it's all about us doing it together. Yeah. Here's the thing. When you're in community, you get the opportunity to constantly be reconstructed by those that love you. When you're not, you can't reconstruct. You can only deconstruct. So we have a whole movement now of people deconstructing their faith, but they're not in community. And the thing is, you can't produce more resources to heal yourself. You have to get that from other people. If you suck at finances, pardon my French, you need to get around someone that's good and go, hey, can you help me? My 2x4 is rotten and has termites all over it. You have some spares. Can you help construct me? Because the Holy Spirit turns us in the image of God, but most of the time he does that through other people. That's why iron sharpens iron. That's why wounds from a friend can be trusted. That's why you should have a plethora of wisdom and leaders around you so that you can have success. It's all throughout Scripture. But we live in an isolated context in most of our life, especially post-COVID. So people think, spirituality, it functions the same way. It doesn't. Yeah. The whole story of the Bible is a pilgrimage of people. It's not a personal pursuit of Jesus for my egotistical end. It's a personal pursuit of Jesus to move the pilgrimage of everyone forward. And that is so key. And it's not just key at the beginning of your journey. It's what you have to do until you get to the grave, or if Jesus comes back, as we tarry here, to use that word. Yeah. Dumb joke. But you'd always hear as a kid, he'd be like, unless Jesus tarries, you'd hear that. And I always thought, who's Terry? Is he an angel? Like Gabriel, Michael, and Terry the angel. Because I want Terry to call us. Anyways. So community was key for you. But then community also sounds like gave you the fuel to make the hard decision.
Yeah.
Of not choosing basketball, of like going on ministry. And you went on a 1-year pilgrimage. We can use that language for a while. Or didn't you? You didn't go to school. You just kind of like figured out for a year, right?
Yeah. So
a gap year, as they call it.
Yeah,
now.
gap.
Just taking a gap year.
Yeah. So I didn't take like a full year.
Hike the Himalayas of Salem, Missouri.
Bro, I did definitely spend some time out in the woods, hiking, camping, healthy and unhealthy parts of that story, definitely, with being involved in the community, but then also individualistic.
Did you almost die? One of those stories? Like you got caught in the wild? Maybe I'm mixing you up with someone else.
Maybe. We'll have to maybe circle back. I've had some life-threatening scenarios out in the woods, but none that come to mind immediately in this stage of life.
Got it.
So like when I was working at Teen Challenge in Arkansas, in that space, there were some moments that were pretty sketchy.
Because of the teenagers?
Because of the teenagers.
Like children of the courts?
Yeah, just like...
Hold on. So you took a group of teen challenge kids out into the nature.
We did, yeah.
And gave them like cooking weapons and stuff? And
you would give them equipment that would sometimes turn into weapons. Yeah, so you just have to be on your guard and be aware. And you know, a tool in one man's hand can become a weapon in another's. So if they know how to use it properly.
Wow. Is that part of the 12 steps?
No,
like,
definitely
number
not.
13, you're going to defend yourself from Livy and Jimmy with a fishhook bayonet.
Man. Yeah. We call that adventure therapy.
Adventure therapy.
Yeah.
Bro, that's so good. Hey, welcome to Collab.Church. After culture class, you can sign up for adventure therapy. You're just going to need a sharp spoon and a sock full of nickels. Yo, speaking of sock full of nickels, when I was at youth camp one year, being a pastor's kid, I always was like, used and abused at events, like if they not in the sense of like if someone had to go alone to like be with another team or like we have to have one guy sit out of the game. It's like well, Chancellor can do it. So they sent me into this group of like a different just cabin. It wasn't with my church. So at youth camp, you camp with your school. I'm laughing so much I can't even get it straight. You stay the night in a cabin with your youth group, guys with guys, girls with girls.
Yep.
And in Oklahoma, you would compete every single day to win the trophy of God. And that was really important. So we would fight during the day. That night, we would all get saved over and over. It was a great time. Yeah. A lot of people cried. A lot of things happened. So I got put into a different group. So I grew up in the suburbs, which I loved. It was great. The group I got put in was like backcountry hood kids, and like you have to grow up in a Midwest context to understand that, and I loved it. So I go in and one of the kids saw me, and I don't remember everything he said, but he was like, hey man, he's like, you better play good or I'm gonna have a sock full of nickels on your face. And that was my first encounter, and so I thought to myself, what is this sock full of nickels? Like I didn't understand, being ignorant. And so he explained it to me. Needless to say, even to this day, when I see a nickel, I think of that guy. And so, anyways, that's just a pointless story.
Man,
God bless.
that's good. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks, man. This was good. This is mostly how we talk. Yeah. We have deep convos, and then we laugh. So, anyways, talking about sock full of nickels, in community and being important, where were we at?
I think we were talking about like individualism and just staying rooted in community and how that helps you kind of on your path.
Yeah. Nature. So you were discovering yourself. Okay, you took a gap year. Yeah, and then you're like, yo, I'm gonna give up the scholarship to go pursue ministry.
Yeah, so I knew I didn't want to pursue basketball anymore after becoming a Christian, and knew I wanted to go into full-time ministry, which meant I needed to go to school and get my degree and experience in education and all that. And so wanted to go to Central Bible College. No longer exists.
RIP. R.I.P.
So the first semester that I wanted to go there, they actually merged with Evangel University. And so I ended up going to Evangel, stayed in a dorm that was for all the athletes. And so it was kind of ended up being in an environment that I was used to. Mm-hmm. But instead of kind of going back into that lifestyle, honestly just kind of gave me more of a hunger to pursue what I was there for. and helped me kind of bring those two things together in a cool way. And so I spent a semester at Evangel, was bored out of my mind. Like, was skipping classes, not really wanting to go to the classroom. And honestly, I just wanted, what I was doing at that time was I was wanting to go into Springfield, which is where the school was at, and just like reach out to people and help. Primarily like people who are homeless or on the street and just needed water or a meal or whatever.
Yeah, boots on the ground.
Yeah. And so I just like found myself keep going off campus to go do those things. And I was like, man, education matters. Being in the classroom is important, but like that's just not, that's hard for me. I've never been like an academic or a school guy. Was never a big reader until after becoming a follower of Jesus. And so being in the school only or exclusively was a challenge for me. But during that time, actually found a really great friend group that helped me during that semester. So I knew through that experience on being on site at Evangel that I couldn't do that, but knew I needed to continue my education. Through that experience, got connected to a local church and a youth pastor named Steve Sabota, who told me about JRLC.
Steve's a legend.
And so it kind of brought those two things together for me. It allowed me to continue my education, but then also get the experience, the hands-on, keeping myself busy with ministry and developing kind of this purpose or calling that I felt like God was putting on my heart and my life to pursue. And so there's some time in between that experience at Evangel, going back home, feeling frustrated, kind of dissatisfied, restless. At that time, we were still in Missouri. It was just my mom and I on this really beautiful house on some farmland and property to where I'd go out and hike and just be in the woods and kind of pray and process and hang with my dog and figure out like, okay, God, I really feel like you put this in my heart, but like, how are you going to make this happen and make this a reality? Yeah. So I went back there and then ended up going to JRLC, finishing my schooling there, and you know the rest of the story.
Yeah. It's cool. It's cool how God gave you that year as a gift to like discover the new you. I tell people when they first give their hearts over, I'm like, hey, give yourself some time to figure out how your new heart and your new brain works. You know, it's like the Wizard of Oz, the Scarecrow, when he gets a brain, and it's like you got to figure it out now.
Yeah,
it's like life is so different. It's like give yourself some time, because I'll meet people that are like, why am I not immediately different, or like why am I acting like this, or why is this a problem, or and like, yo, you're figuring out how to function with your new brain. Like chill. You know, it's okay.
That's a great.
And I think what happens is Christians put more urgency on it, where we're like, now that you're a Christian, you got to do this and this and this, and it's like, I had no idea freedom was such a burden, but it's like, yo, the Holy Spirit has His pace of grace, and not all paces is the same. Yeah. So chill, you know. And I think Christians, how you create competitive Christians, it's not usually through the new Christian. It's usually old Christians like setting expectations, and so now it's like, follow Jimmy. Jimmy will show you. And then you follow Jimmy. And then you start getting feedback on Jimmy. And then it's kind of like, it's like the big brother. It's like, can you be more like your brother? Can you be more like your sister? And then it's like, I guess I better be competitive. Yeah. But then it's like, when we read the Bible, it's like, hey, all of your good works are filthy, disgusting rags. So chill out, bro. Yeah. It's all grace. It's all Jesus. So then once you come to that reality, you can go, okay, so Jesus, what do you want to do with your life today? I mean, I'm living it, but like, what do you want to do? And then it's like, oh, okay. It's a different context. Yeah. It's not a competition. Yeah. But it's cool that you got that year to do that. But then the other thing I think is so important for like people like us, you know, we're the Christian entrepreneurs. Everybody loves to be an entrepreneur now. Everybody has a side business nowadays. But the thing is, for you and me, to like sit down just in a classroom and just read books, just study, just do that, that would be a nightmare in that season of life, because we were doers. Like you were literally playing basketball and you're working every day, you're working out, like you're going, it's like training physically, and now it's like, okay, sit down. And that's where pastors, churches, and leaders need to continue to up the game of how do you take people in a driven context like that and apply the Bible to it. And I think colleges like James River Leadership College, certain master's commissions or high-level intern programs, they create that
YWAM, right?
YWAM. Yeah. I mean, there's so many. They create that space where you get the mental, but then also the physical application. And for me, that was huge, because like
huge. Yeah,
that's how I've always lived my life, and it's true of pastor spiritual things, but it's also true of any trade. You see people that get out of school with a resume already, or already have projects that have been built. I think about my brother-in-law, Chad. Shout out to you, one of the legends. Another Chad. I know. I love the Chads in my life. But he graduated with his engineering degree, but he had a backlog of all the projects he had already done. And so he's exponentially better and ahead than people that just sat in the classroom.
Yep.
And that's true in the pastor and leaders vein. And so where I want to go with this conversation now is because we start off introductory, discipleship, getting saved, all of that. But now you get into more of a niche group that still is wide, but like leaders, pastors. So we met James River Church. Incredible stories, so many things.
Yeah.
So thankful. There's so much time we could spend there, but I want to get to the back end, kind of where we're at now, because it's been beautiful to watch our paths go different ways. You know, like I came to Miami, Florida. You went Arkansas, Portland, Seattle. You were in a van for a while.
Yeah, lived
talk,
in a van
talk
for
about
a
the
year
van
and a
life.
half.
How was the van life?
Van life was amazing. So I was at Missouri, graduated the college, started working at the church, and then knew I wanted to pursue the girl that I was dating that now is my wife. And we were going back to her hometown a lot to spend time with new friends that we were making and family. And it was just a sick place. Like Bentonville, Arkansas is now pretty popular, and a lot of people know of it as a destination spot for a ton
You
of
were
different
there
reasons.
before it was popular.
But we were there as it was developing and
Yeah.
growing, and it was amazing. And so when we moved, we knew we wanted to move back to Arkansas. I wanted to move to Bentonville primarily to be closer to her family because we knew we wanted to get married, and I wanted them to know me so that she wasn't marrying a stranger.
Yeah.
And so the way that we came to terms with that was Katie came across, which wasn't so mainstream or trendy at the time, was van life. And so that's like the 2020 Mercedes Sprinter van with solar and a shower and a bathroom and a kitchen and all that, like the ideal version, and then the Chad real version. And so I got some money back from Evangel for some reason, like a $2,000 check. And what I did with that is I got on Facebook Marketplace and found a van that was less than $2,000, had no AC, ended up finding out that there was mold in underneath the floors. It was a 1984 Chevy G20 two-tone brown van, and lived out of it for a year and a half.
That thing was a gym.
It was amazing, dude. I loved it. That was honestly probably the most
That's the cover photo.
simple and fun time in my life.
That's cool.
Like,
You need to send me that picture. Remind me after this. I'll use it as the cover photo. We'll have that van with our
that
faces.
sounds good. But yeah, lived out of a van for a year and a half because I didn't want to rent an apartment just for me, and Katie and I didn't want to live together.
Yeah.
So, and she had an idea of van life, and so I was like, hey, while we're dating and we're engaged, getting ready to get married, I'll try it out, test it. We can build the van however we want to make it livable for the both of us. Once we get married, we got married in Yosemite, California. So we drove from Arkansas to California, and then did a Highway 1 road trip from, it was supposed to be from California to the new town that we were going to live in, which was Seattle. And then in Portland, decided to go back to Arkansas. But we lived out of the van for that whole time. That's
cool.
So it was awesome, man.
Dude, I
One
love
of the best
it.
times
van
ever.
life.
So
Van
good.
life. Because we're best friends, it's so hard because there's so many stories. Like I love to hear again and recap. But
Yeah.
I want to jump to now something I think it's a little deeper to your soul, but it's produced so much because you're a man that's gone through a lot of blessings, a lot of brokenness, a lot of burdens, a lot of rebuilding, and it shaped who you are today. And I like the guy here today compared to the guy 10 years ago. And I really like the guy 10 years ago. But what I love is when you watch people go through life, they get salt on their life. I use seasoned saints for anyone that's 55 or older. Like, I want to be a seasoned saint when I'm old. I don't just want to be old or a senior citizen, but I want to have salt on my life. That, like, I went through some things. And one of the things I want to lean into is you follow the Lord, you listen to the Lord. He's been engaged in your life. And there's been seasons where he's called you into certain areas. You've said yes. And then it changed completely from what you thought. But it's led to where you are. And sometimes that was really good. And sometimes it was like, yo, God, is this thing broken? Like, what's going on? So you take it from there where you want to go. But why don't you give us an introductory, like, look into that. Let's open that door and just talk about what it was like to go that for your soul, how you discovered God more. And, like, for people that listen to this that are in that season, which is most people, especially nowadays, what's some fruit that they can have from it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the first things that comes to mind is when I was at Evangel and feeling restless and like, man, it's important to get an education, but I just feel like you're calling me to do something a little bit unique or different. And then you need, for me personally, I need people to process that with, not only through scripture and spiritual disciplines, which I'm a huge fan of, and try to do regularly, right? But also a running joke that I hear commonly is like a spiritual gift should be common sense. And so the best way that I get common sense is through trusted friends. So that's you. I could list off a couple other guys, Micah, Justin, that are my go-to guys. That
Those are my friends too.
That we share some good dudes in our life. And so I'll go to them and say, hey, this is...
Sorry, I'm going to pause you. Yeah. High-quality friends are hard to find.
Yeah, I would say
like they
true.
are. Like when you find one, it's like, do you have a good friend? Can he be my friend?
Yeah.
As a kid, whenever I was at McDonald's play place, you remember those back in the day? When I would meet someone, I'd be like, do you want to be my friend? And if they say yes, I would play with them. And one time, one kid told me no. And that hurt my feelings. But I got over it, kind of. But it's funny because now...
Sorry you had to go through that.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I've worked through it. You know, I took him into the ball pit and dealt with it. Take that, Timmy. But it's funny because I've gone back, though, to that mindset where, like, when I meet someone that has a new friend, it's a good friend. Like, I'll call them and start to build a relationship, and I'll jump to it, like, very quickly. I'm like, hey, will you be my friend?
Yeah.
And the reason I do is because I establish the boundaries of the relationship, but then also kind of lay out the expectation of them and me. It sounds super weird. Like, I don't make it that professional.
Sure.
But just to know,
but
like,
hey,
I want to invest in you. I want you to invest in me. But then also what I do is like, hey, you have real estate to come into my life and get on to me, you know? And not everyone does. There's few people that really get the 100% real estate to come in. Like you do, my brother-in-law does, Pastor David, Jamie Paul, obviously Jacqueline.
Yeah, I was going to say, hopefully our wives.
Yeah, our wife. For me, I always forget to bring her in because, like, I literally believe Scripture that we're one. You know, a lot of people don't, and that's where your marriage is a little. But we won't get into that. But yeah, there's few people that get like the 100% access, and then from there, like I let certain degrees or in certain areas.
Yeah.
But for me, that's just help though, like establishing those friends.
Yeah.
And,
go ahead.
And then you work at it. You got to be invested. Like, I haven't talked to this person forever. Like, I need to call, you know, I need to like text. I need to make time. And you know, we do that. And you have to fight for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not something that comes naturally.
Yeah.
Unintentionally and subconsciously, we just drift. That's, at least I do.
Yeah. Everyone does.
Propensity that I have.
Think they do.
And especially, I lean more introverted than you. I would say you're probably more extroverted. And so, like, for me,
occasionally, I've been known to be a little extroverted.
Yeah, a little bit. And so, for me, like, I can have 1 to 3 close friends, like you're talking about, 5 maybe. But that's it. And I'm honestly good. Like, for me, a great night is hanging out with my wife at the house, eating a good meal, maybe watching a movie, having some good conversation. Or when I'm in the car, calling you or a Mike or somebody and just catching up and chatting, but I don't need a ton of that. And so you have different layers of relationship that are essential. So you can't have 150 close friends, but you should have 100. I think it's like 150 to 200 is the max of acquaintances or people that you know in your sphere of your world. And then 15 to 20 that maybe you're not sharing everything with them, or they can speak directly into the things that you're facing and have a vote. They have value, but maybe don't have a vote.
That's good. Yeah.
And then you have the 1 to 5 that it's like, you have a vote in this, and I'm going to listen and take your feedback into consideration about what I do. And so for me, that's been incredibly helpful to understand those layers of relationship, because for me, being a little bit more introverted, I enjoy this more than, you know, tell me about your boat, tell me about what you do for work. Do you like to golf? You know, all those kind of conversations, just the surface level. Like, I can do it. Yeah. And I know it's important to build that connection with people, but I don't enjoy it, you know. But having those layers of relationship are incredibly vital. And so for me, having people speak in and be able, so like again, going back to the kind of the question that we were talking about, in this journey and following Jesus and doing what he's called me to do and what that's looked like ideally in the reality and how I pivoted and gotten to where I'm at now is I'll maybe get an impression or a thought, an idea that I feel like that's definitely not from me or scripture or whatever or spiritual discipline, and then I filter that through Katie through close friends and help process before I make a decision, because before I was very responsive or reactive.
Yeah.
For example, when I was at Evangel and feeling restless and frustrated, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to drop out. And I was influenced by a movie, I think it was Into the Wild.
Oh my gosh.
Incredible movie. One of my favorite films. But it's about this dude that literally just, treks, burns his car, his Social Security card, like everything, and then walks to Alaska and ends up dying in a van. It's based off a true story, I believe. But I remember watching that, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to do the Christian version of that. I'm going to be a missionary, but with no boundaries. So instead of flying or driving and having a posse and being catered to or whatever, like, I'm just going to have a backpack. Because I've always had a heart specifically.
It's like the Jesus movement, bro.
Yeah.
You're like, let's go. You didn't even know.
So
it.
I didn't
You're
even know
like,
what that was at the time. Yeah. But I was like, you know what? I'm just going to have a backpack. And I've always had a heart for people who are houseless, homeless, or just immediate need and needing someone to see them and care for them. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to travel across the United States, visit different homeless shelters, and serve there, work there, resupply, and continue on my journey of just doing that for a while. So I almost dropped out of college, but thankfully I had friends in my life that I built a relationship with that I remember sitting at a Starbucks right down the street from Evangel, and a friend named Nicole and another buddy was there, and I was kind of sharing the idea with them, and they were excited, and they're kind of bent that way, lifestyle-wise, to where like, that's really exciting, but it's December. And it's freezing cold. Like, do you think that right now is actually a good time for that? And they're like, you can do it, but I just don't know if the season is right now. And that was really helpful in helping process. So all that being said, like, since that moment in time when I feel like God is calling us to do something, Katie and I, or for work or whatever, like, having that framework has been really helpful. And I've noticed when I retreat from that or remove myself from that process, which I have done, and I tend to isolate, things have not worked out very well for me. And then when I feel like, okay, God, this is moving forward, and we can see you working through the details and making this happen for us, usually it's because it has a mixture of those elements involved in it. And so like Portland, Oregon, we decided to move back in Portland on our honeymoon. And since then, in that time we were living in Arkansas, went through COVID, newly married, had to move in with the in-laws for a while, was in an industry that I cared about, but was honestly trying to replace ministry for just getting into management and being able to influence people in the coffee world. But just wasn't the thing that I felt like God called me to at a deep level. I just felt like I was kind of settling.
Yeah.
And then going through all of that change and shut down and got to stay at home and all that was just disorienting and confusing to where we felt stuck and restless again. And so Katie's dad has been what I say about Katie's dad is he's the dad that I wish I had growing up.
Wow.
And has been the dad that I prayed for. And so he's been an amazing father-in-law, incredible. And so he was very reluctant to see us. And a lot of other friends, the guy that married us, Justin, was like, if you move to Seattle after you get married and you're going to live in a van, that's stupid. Like, don't do that. Like, you should come back home, be around friends and family, figure out, like, what one means now, and being married. And doesn't mean you don't go do it. Just don't go do it right now. And reluctantly, we're like, no, like, we feel like we're going to go do this. Primarily me.
Yeah.
And so in Portland, we're like, no one's forcing us to do this. I remember we were sitting at a Patagonia film. They do like documentaries, and they were releasing a new documentary to the public for the first time. And we went and did it just on a whim. And we were sitting there waiting for the film to be shown. And I almost chairs like this. I remember looking over at Katie and it's like, I think we should go back to Bentonville. And she's like, no one's forcing us to go to Seattle. Like, if we want to go back to Bentonville, let's do it.
Wow.
But during that
go ahead. You had a job that was lined up in Seattle,
I was going to work at Patagonia.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is something that, like, I love.
Yeah, that you want to do.
Nicknamed Chattagonia because of the amount of Patagonia stuff that I have. Yeah. Like, I love that company and would work for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we had a job lined up. We were going to live out of the van. We had a way, but really it wasn't connected back to the calling and knowing your identity and your calling. And so we went back to Arkansas, felt stuck. And we had people speak into our life, Justin being one. Katie's dad was like, man, you're grown adults and I love you guys and I'll support you, but I just don't see that for you right now. Moving to Seattle after being married, like that just doesn't seem smart. And he's a Jesus loving good dude. Like he's awesome to where I would listen to him. And so thankfully, I think in God's grace and timing and looking back on that, we got married in 2019. So if he actually ended up going to Seattle, living in a van during 2020, like
in Seattle,
yeah, we might have made it, but like think about how that would have set up our marriage and our future and our work. Like Patagonia, most stores shut down during that time, so I would have been out of work. Like just looking back on it,
a lot of bad.
Yeah. Like thankfully, I had some good people in my life to help me.
Those times, like, thank you God for the prayers you answered. But also, thank you for all the ones you didn't answer.
100%.
Thank you, Lord, that I did not
100%.
marry that girl in high school. I loved it. Thank you, I did not take that job.
No doubt.
Thank you that that Amazon box had to get returned. And I got the money back. I mean,
Yep.
there's so many things. Yeah.
So many things. Yeah, and so like we were back in Arkansas, and then during that time knew we wanted to get back into ministry. Through some friends in a church that we were part of, they wanted us to go and work at that church. Went through that, and then kind of got in the final stage and was like, I don't think this is it. Again, brought people into that process to kind of discern and make a decision. And again, kind of felt like we were settling for like, okay, God, we feel like you're calling us back into full-time ministry, but we don't really think that this is it, or I don't really think that it's it, but it's the only thing. Because there was a while that, man, I felt like I was knocking on doors. And no doors were opening. And we just felt stuck.
Yeah.
I was
and
like,
then scripture down through, it's like, knock on the door, be open. You're like, you're a liar. I've knocked on every door and nothing's open.
Yeah. So we just, like, there were no doors opening to where it's like, all right, we'll settle. It is a great church. Like, if I named the church, everyone would be like, oh, yeah, we know that church by and large. But just for us, it was like, felt a little bit like compromise. Or like, this is the only thing, so okay, we'll do it, you know. But through that season, we ended up moving to Portland, Oregon, got back into the recovery space and connected to kind of my story and how the context in which I got saved. Because after I became a Christian, I stopped using, stopped drinking, and thankfully, since then, have not had any substance abuse issues or addiction.
Come on, bro.
Which has been awesome. Had other issues that are ongoing that you got to work through, and sometimes I feel like God saves you and like removes you from situations. For example, for me with substance abuse related to drugs and alcohol. But other times, and more occasionally I see it this way, is that he actually saves you through learning how to work through it and go through it in a healthy way by having relationships and changing behaviors and coping and all that.
It's easy not to have problems if there's never an opportunity to have a problem. You know?
Yeah.
It's easy to be faithful to your wife when you have no other option. It's easy not to cheat at finances, when you don't have finances.
Yeah.
That's the abundant life God gives us. And that's where, I don't know, I think a lot of people miss it out because they hear the best is yet to come and greater things you ask or imagine. It's like, because God takes you directly into the thing that you're afraid of. I've prepared a table before you where there's no problems.
Yeah.
No, I prepared a table for you in the presence of your enemies. And so he teaches you to dine in what you feared. But he teaches you to be at peace and then to work through it. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I don't run. I'm not terrified. I like walk. I walk at a pace that's comfortable. I love my Fitbit. But when you walk, your heart's resting, you're not sweaty, it's enjoyable. Like, I know my heart rate when I'm walking.
Unless you live in Florida, bro.
Yeah. Well, okay. It's a little bit of sweat,
At least
okay?
for me.
Don't mess up my example, man. It's a good one. But when you're walking, it's like, hey, I teach you how to go through it. And that's where abundant life happens. That's where maturity happens.
Yep.
If you're not willing to go through that, you can't really have the abundant life.
That's the integrity and the character part. Like, recently was watching Band of Brothers, I think it was.
Dude, so good.
So good, man. And the war is usually won through people fighting, not people leaving or getting pulled out of the fight.
And it's crazy how I'm not a war historian in any regards.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah.
Like anyone showed up to this to hear that. But when I give that caveat. But most wars that I have studied, it's funny how many fight But there are few men that made the defining moment because they went the extra or they pivoted or a decision was made from the Civil War to World War II to so many. Pick your
Sure.
It's like many fought, which is honorable and true. It's great, and we're thankful for it. But there's a few that rise above the fray, as you would hear sayings, but that like they go the extra limit or there's that extra push.
Yeah.
And I think that's what God is calling us to. It's like, don't just fight, but go to that extra push because that's the defining moment.
Yeah.
That's the make or break, right there.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. I think kind of to bring that home outside of like maybe the military world or the war world, something that, whatever you want to call it, motto, mantra, an idea or a concept that I learned through the fitness industry actually was this phrase, into the storm. And it's kind of like what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. So instead of running from a storm, I think it's buffaloes actually in particular will weather the storm, will go towards it in the direction of where it's coming. It comes from a guy named Rich Froning, who's really popular in the CrossFit industry and world. But that's their phrase for their brand for CrossFit Mayhem is into the storm. That we're actually going to go in the direction towards the problem and face it head on.
I love that.
And you're formed in a way
Yeah.
that sitting in the convenience of your apartment watching Netflix or on your couch or in an office just doesn't happen, man. At least in my experience.
No,
and
it's
so
true.
Being stuck in Arkansas and working at a coffee shop and being in a warehouse alone, packing boxes or working out or going into nature with teenage dudes who are harmed to themselves or others or potentially you, and learning how to relate to them, work with them, keep them safe, keep you safe, communicate with them, operate in that environment, moving to Portland and something that was a dream becomes a nightmare pretty quickly, to moving across the country again to now Florida. Like I have learned things through that just staying in my comfort zone wouldn't have taught me.
Yeah.
Good and bad. And we could talk about both at length there.
It's been so fun to watch you over this last decade because you went from this crazy, chaotic life and everything and maxed, just both hands full. Mm-hmm. To now God's called you to a life, Ecclesiastes says, where it's just one handful, one open. Mm. But you're like a modern day monk. Like for me, like you're the only person who your phone's always on airplane mode. You're not on social.
Most of the time.
Like you just delete Instagram because you're like, I looked at 2 photos today instead of 1, like you're doing that. You're always like becoming simpler. So I love is like you're experiencing that personally, but in your life, God's like, no, I'm going to make your life so chaotic and mess around and all this, but he's defining you. And what's cool is I just felt this like as we were talking, like he's teaching you how to be successful no matter where you're at because of you. And someone like you that's driven, I mean, an athlete, an entrepreneur, a hustler, grinder, you love tasks. You love seeing, we were just talking about a sauna, but you love hitting it and seeing that unicorn fly across. You love but the thing is, I feel like in this season, what God's been teaching you is like, no, I've been teaching you to be successful just by yourself because you're doing what I said. And that doesn't look like anything else. It goes back to the competition thing, but it's like, it's just because I said do it. Yeah. And that's hard. Yeah. But it's been cool to see you say, okay, Lord, and embrace it and watch who you are. And like, now you're at a point where like you are successful. How long have you and Katie been married now?
Coming up on 5 years.
Bro,
this
let's
year.
go. 5 years?
I have that right. Yeah.
Listen, dude, that's what I'm talking about. Me and Jax are getting close to 10.
That's amazing.
It's insane, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
that's
like
incredible.
But like we're men that are committed to our wives. We're not going to be the statistic. Like we will set the pace. Yeah. My mantra that I'm like learning this season is like, we've burnt the ships. There's no turning back. Like that's where I'm at in a lot of things in my life. It's like there's no option but to have a fruitful marriage. Yeah. Like I'm going to do it. Yeah. And it's like there's no option but continue to walk in financial freedom than to be physically fit in the context and to love my kids. Like I'm just boom. And when trials happen, then let's cry about the spilled milk for 2 seconds, but then get up, like let's make some new milk. Yeah. And it's like, well, how do you make milk? It's like, well, you go find a cow and we're going to milk the cow. It's like, you have to go back to the basics even when you fall down and keep going, but burn the ships. There's no turning around. Yeah. And so, but success is such a jewel. It's a great prize, but I think the key that I'm learning this season is the trick is not can I have success, but can I sustain success? Can I keep carrying the weight?
Yeah.
Like, it was a lot easier to carry the success of marriage at 1 year than it is at 10 years.
Yeah.
It's like,
I can, yeah.
yo, it's beautiful. It's great. But 10 years is heavier. Like, there's more wins and more losses. There's more excitement and more upsets, you know? And so having success be sustained, like, that's different. Are you experiencing that? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. It actually reminds me of something I was reading recently by a guy named John Tyson, who's I think he's the lead pastor in New York City. And he was talking about how our culture and kind of our moment in time, and this might have been true historically as well, but like primarily we applaud people who make commitments more than applauding people who keep them. And he was talking about in the context of marriage.
Hold on, say that again. It's just so good.
It's like,
say it again.
So we applaud people who make commitments more than we applaud people for keeping them.
Man.
And I mean, there's some like psychology to that, like keeping a commitment once you've already created the expectation and it's fulfilled. It's like, well, that's what I thought was going to happen. I was going to hope that was going to happen. So why should I have to applaud you for that? So I get that a little bit. But his whole point was like, there's a whole industry, and I'll be doing by February 6 weddings in the last year, and premarital counseling is required with every couple. And so it's funny that there's a whole industry when I'm working with couples who are engaged, getting ready for their big day. We spend so much time and focus. Katie and I included. We wanted to be in Yosemite, by the waterfall, in nature, with our friends, and every little detail is played out. And so we spend so much time for our wedding day and saying I do, but we don't get, at least in our experience, didn't get a lot of education or preparation on every day after. And so you have the teary-eyed moment, you get the wedding album. If you have social media, you're posting all your highlights and best memories. And that's something that should be honored, that should be kept sacred, that is meaningful. But every day after is way more important. So actually me committing to my vows and living them out is as important or more important than me saying them back in April in 2019 and becoming the man who lives out his vows to his wife, which is a work in progress for sure. Yeah. But that whole idea of like getting successful, however you define success as a leader or wherever you're at for your context, is one thing. But that's even something that I've been processing right now, because I've been at the church for a year, and by all metrics and most people are telling me that I'm doing a really great job. And a thing that I'm thinking about in the back of my mind at my 1 year review and thinking about the future is, can I keep this thing going? Like, you can have one good year, but can you have 5? Can you have 10? Can you have 15? Can you have 20? So from a career perspective or a leadership perspective or organizational, there's an element to that. But then also, I'd probably say to you and to people, like, here are my priorities. Me and God, me and my wife, me and friends, me and work. But how I was living, that order was definitely different. Wow. It was probably me and work. Wow. Me and God, as long as he was blessing work and I was feeling okay. And then emergencies or things that just needed to get done would take up a lot of my headspace or my time. And then me and Katie. And then me and friends. And so I'd say the last six months to a year, close to a year maybe, been really trying to, not just based on what I believe or I say I believe, but based on my behaviors and my commitments and what's on my calendar. What am I scheduling? Can you see from how I spend my money, how I spend my time, that I prioritize my relationship with God first and my relationship with my wife before anything else? And that ebbs and flows. But for me, that's the sustaining part of success. For me, success is, am I faithful to my wife, and do we have a great relationship? And does, more than anybody else, she know that I love her and would do anything for her? Do I have a great relationship with Jesus and actually enjoy being with him more than doing things for him or in his name or being a professional as a pastor, but have no
Who are me and him?
no depth,
Yeah.
in my soul with just him.
It's
if you
good.
took the title away, like, would I still love Jesus and follow him?
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the two things that I'm focusing on currently, of like the sustaining success piece.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, work to me is incredibly important. What I do gives me a lot of meaning and significance. But it's kind of that one hand full, one hand empty is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
To where I feel like over the last 3 or 4 years, it's been this on a lot of things that I felt like I had my hands really tight on. Okay, if I have this, then I'll be.
Yeah.
Or if I lose this, then I'll be.
Yeah.
And it's become
Wow.
more like that.
Wow.
Probably more like that.
Yeah,
But,
I get you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to release control more and more.
The totem pole that you just described of how you were, that's how most men are, like hands down. Like,
Yeah.
Because work and accomplishment, what I do, we think, okay, that flows in everything. If I accomplish this well, that'll overflow into my family. But it doesn't. Like, you can be successful at your career, the start of business, the church, the book, the podcast, whatever it is, and it destroys your bride.
Yeah.
Hurt your kids.
Yeah.
But then you can start all those things and they be horrible. But you foster your kids and your family, and it doesn't matter because it's better. Because like when the home is good, everything else can tank, and it's good. But like the home's not good and everything else is great, it's like I don't really care.
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
That's where for me, I mean, my favorite thing in the world is my kids and my wife, and like. I already tear up thinking about, like, I freaking love my family.
Yeah.
I'm the most blessed man. But, like, I've gone through seasons, like, with church planning and all kinds of stuff where it's been like, well, this is awful. But then I go home and I'm like, it's all good. Like, this is what matters. Yeah. And as a hospice chaplain, I think I got the gift of being a hospice chaplain at a young age. Like, this was before I was 30 and into my 30s. During COVID, going home to home, just watching people die and just being there and hearing their stories and getting to share life. But it made me value life so much more, made me value what really matters. And it made me value the gospel in a different way and learn it in a different way. That's why I love getting around someone that's like followed Jesus 50, 60 years. Like they're old and just need WD-40 and the red lights on. But I just love to get here and hear them talk about life. And they say the same scripture I'm saying, but there's just so much more weight to it. Yeah. But the reason why is, like, in scripture, the glory of God is a reference to weight. And so they've been carrying that glory longer. So it's like when you meet a professional bodybuilder for so long, there's a wear and tear, but there's stories to it where it's like, man, we're saying the same verse, but you got some more weight behind it. Like, tell me more. Like, I love that. And being around that, it just helped me understand that. I got to borrow people's story and honestly inherit their context. But something that shook me, man, was I went to this one house of this place in Miami. It's one of those, like, if I said the name, Penthouse View, like, he had it all. And this dude, like, I mean, the guy's loaded. And his wife just died of cancer. And we're sitting there in the living room with all the fine trimmings of life, success, the ocean view, like everything you could ever want. And he literally goes, man, I thought I was going to get more time. And he goes, none of this matters. I'd give it all just for one more day with her. And I'm like, wow, I'm not watching a movie. I'm not reading a book. I'm living in the middle of a man's pain. And this guy was successful. He was so busy on life that it was not for him, but for his schedule, it was an inconvenience for his wife to die. That's how his life was. It was inconvenient for his wife to die because of what life was demanding from him. Yeah. And here's the thing about the world. It'll take everything from you and leave nothing for you. That's what it does. And that's why you can't have two masters. It has nothing to do with money. It's because Jesus is a kind master. He's not just going to take from you. He gives you everything because you're his. And when you're in that proper order, that's inheritance stuff. But if you're serving the world, it's like, no, the world's just going to take everything from you. Yeah. And it's like when I talk to guys, it's like, bro, listen, you get in a car crash tomorrow and someone's going to fill your spot. Someone else is going to write the book. Someone else is going to create the song. Listen, I value all that. You made the image of God. Like, get out there and do it. But it's not your identity. Yeah. It's not. Yeah. And I had to discover that, like, coming to Miami to plant Collab.Church. Like, I went from serving at literally the Disney World of churches. Like for me, my story in season, like it was amazing. I mean, I love them, and it was everything.
Yeah.
And then God called me to this radical step out, and we left well and transition. And then I go to being like the 5 a.m. Starbucks guy. So I go from leading teams and preaching all this to like people cussing me out, and like drunk people coming in throwing up and getting frappuccinos at 5 a.m. And I'm knowing now from what I thought was success. And I'm like, this is horrible. And then Jesus was like, yeah, so who am I now? And it's like, no, you don't get to ask that. It's like, because it's easy to love Jesus as a pastor when it's like, I'm on the stage, I'm doing the lights. Like you can get into that and you don't realize it. You're doing stuff for God. But then it's like, who are you and me when all this is gone?
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa. And I've asked myself that a lot. But it just went to that new level. You know, God's calling us from glory to glory, but also those are deeper conversations. So he revisits the same conversation, but at a deeper level. And so we just went back to square one of like the little kid at elementary school. I mean, I was at kids' church, and I'm crying after service. And my teacher comes up to me like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm just thinking of all my friends that need to know Jesus. And God took me back to that at 7 years old. And I was like, God, keep that heart.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is after that happened, then God goes, great. Now your next assignment, go to hospice. Go help people die and love them like I would. But I couldn't be there for the people's end part of their journey until he brought me to the end of that, the end of myself. Then I could serve people better. And it shaped me, man. It's crazy.
Yeah.
You know? And so, yeah, man, it's just been wild.
Yeah.
This whole journey of everything. So one other thing I just wanted to say, when we were talking about success is as your strengths come out, because we were starting to talk about all these strengths and stuff, there's also a shadow side to every strength. Man. You know,
100%.
We've talked about this a lot, but I'm like, I know we've been running. How long have we been going? Where are we at? Okay. How much time we got left? Okay. So I got to use the restroom. So we're going to come back. Okay. Let's go. Kettlebell workout.
I'm down. I worked out. I tried to stay away from any lower body stuff this morning.
Dude, we're ready to go. Dude, we are like the same person because we both don't like to spend money. That's
I know,
fine.
dude.
So is the other Chad.
Yeah, sometimes you have a history of like, hey man, let's go grab lunch. You want to go to lunch with me? It's not communicated, but sometimes it's the interpretation of he's inviting me to lunch, meaning he's gonna pay, he's gonna cover it, and it's like, oh, you got me? You're asking me? Oh, you got me? You picking this up? You paying or am I paying? I'm like, classic freaking Chance, man. Well, but China, what was it called?
China? Oh, Happy China. Best Chinese restaurant at the Eagle Stop gas station in Springfield, Missouri. Happy Eagle China. Stop, yeah. Black pepper chicken, egg wonton, crab rangoon. I'm telling you, bro, fried rice.
Who are you ordering for? Is that just for you?
That's me, dog. ×2 when Jacqueline's coming. It's so good. It is so good.
We all know I can eat food.
I can't wait to go
I'm
back.
making fun of you.
I love to throw down some food, but we are like the same person. My thing is like when I go out to eat with a guy that I'm close to over and over, it's like, hey, you pay, I pay.
Yeah,
100%.
100%.
Maybe mix it up a little. Sometimes I just don't want to pay, being a punk.
Hey,
I used to be bad. So I wasn't. I called it frugal. But then Jacqueline corrected me one day. She's like, no, you're just stingy with your own money. Not like, I can't have it because I'll give everything. But I'm like, hey, man, you want to buy rice and share? Like, who shares rice? But I did. But I wouldn't, like, buy the avocado. I wouldn't pay the extra, like, $1.25.
Me neither.
But, like, for me, like, this is so silly. But it was a spiritual discipline where I was like, there's certain things I want that God's like, hey, you can buy that now. Like, you're at a point in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost wasn't buying it because it's like I didn't trust him. Like when we first moved here, this is so funny, but like we moved here with no jobs. We moved here, no friends. Like we just parachuted in, like okay, on a God dream. Man. And so we had money in the bank we'd saved up, and we were walking around downtown, and I was so thirsty. But Jack was like, "Why don't you buy a bottle of water?" And I was like, "No, I'm fine." And I'm like pouring sweat profusely and like I'm uncomfortable. She's like, just go buy a bottle of water, like take care of yourself. And I like saw the vending machine, but I knew the vending machine was gonna be like $3.50 for a bottle of water. And I was like, I'm not getting robbed. Like I felt that. But literally it was like God, I felt like God was like, dude, you're not even taking care of yourself and you're not trusting me. Like, you don't trust me that you can buy a bottle of water to take care of your body. And it was like, for me, it was like a badge of honor. Like, I'll get home thirsty and prove it. But it was like, no, this is ridiculous.
Get
like,
free water from the sink.
Yeah,
and
free
I
water
save
from the sink.
$3.50.
I saved $3.50.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, dude, now you're dehydrated. You look like a raisin and you made it a horrible time for your wife. Good job, man.
Yeah.
And it's like, I didn't trust God that I was going to like buy the water. But yeah, so I've had to like learn and grow in that. But it's been cool to watch me grow and being not as frugal.
Yeah.
So if we go out to eat though later, you can buy.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
It is interesting though, the different stages developmentally that you go through, not only like literally as you age and grow and mature, but even like spiritually or just stages of life.
Yeah.
Like Katie and I now, more than ever since we've been married, and we still have, when I say this, we have more road ahead of us than any type of road behind us.
Yeah.
And so we have a ton of work still to do.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the context of what I'm about to say. But right now, with us moving to Florida, the church that we work at, we are in the best position that we've ever been in.
That's cool.
Emotionally, financially, spiritually, relationally, physically.
Yeah.
Like, we are in the best position we've ever been in. Does that mean that we love Florida and everything is amazing? No. Are there things that we're still growing in and wanting to cultivate and to develop? 100%. But I still will find myself in a mindset because of maybe how I was raised or grew up, and money in particular was never a thing that we had really growing up. And thankfully my mom protected me from that, but like, it was common for my mom to leave us at home because she was working 2 jobs or whatever, couldn't come to my games. Or whatever it might be, because she's trying to freaking survive, man.
Yeah.
You know, and so I've found myself in that survivalist mindset so many times, to where it's like, hey, you be smart, but like you can afford this.
Yeah.
Now, like we're for the first time, and we're still young, but this past year was the first time that we ever have taken a vacation.
Let's go.
That we didn't have to put it on a credit card. That we weren't scared about when we came back.
Yeah.
Like, we were actually able to do it without all of these
That's cool.
hoops that we had to jump through.
Yeah.
And that was weird. It was like, we can just go and have fun, and
Yeah.
like it's taken care of and we're taken care of.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to have to work 80 hours when I get back to cover the 1 week that I was gone or whatever, you know. And that was different. And that vacation honestly was one of the best that I've ever taken.
That's
it
so
was
awesome.
amazing.
Dude.
So
It's funny you're talking about vacation. Literally last year was the first time I've taken my family like on a vacation. Like, flew somewhere, stayed, did the whole thing.
Where'd you guys go?
We went to flew into Sacramento. Then we drove down through San Francisco all the way down to Salinas, California.
Oh, yeah.
Where most of the vegetables are grown in America. Fantastic. Best carrots in my life I've ever had. Tastes like candy straight out of the dirt.
Carrots?
So good, bro.
Carrots taste like candy?
Oh, dude, it was so good.
That's
yeah.
only found in California, bro.
I think Bun Cabbage. I think that's the farm they were
Okay.
called. Oh, dude, it was fantastic. They had this cabin. Then we did walk through Pebble Beach and like did the drive.
Yeah.
It was awesome. But yeah. So one of the things I'll do in life is get going, you know, and we'll take like small vacations, but like to fully unplug and do that. But I was like so proud. I was thankful to God. Yeah. But I was proud of myself.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm here. Don't got debt.
Yeah.
We're doing this. I'm loving my family, making
Yeah.
time. It's like, man. And it's so cool when you get to a point in your life where consistency begins to have fruit. And God's like, hey, you can eat some of the fruit. Like, use the seeds to plant for the future, but like, you actually can have some fruit.
Yeah.
Like, I want you to have an enjoyable life too.
Yeah.
And not just the trimmings around your current day-to-day operations, but like, I actually want you to have this. And it's like, wow. That's cool. And that's what happens when you steward your life well. It's you get fruit to give other people, but then also you get to enjoy it.
Yeah.
You know, and I think Christians sometimes, the Christian movement can begin to feel guilty about that, about the fruit of our labor. I'm not talking about pastors. I'm talking about whatever your occupation is, where it's like, man, how much fruit of my labor can I have? And then we turn it into a whole money thing. But no, man. Take care of your household.
Yeah.
You know, the one that doesn't take care of their household, they're worse than any sinner. And we think that's like, hey, don't have domestic violence and don't do these things. But it's like, if you don't make memories with your family, you don't take time to treasure your kids and go to the recital, like that's part of taking care of your family.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you pay the bills, if you feed them, if you clothe them. But if you're not there, Dad, and you're making father's wounds, you're not taking care of your family.
Yeah.
You know, that's part of it. So build your home, love on your kids, take care of your wife, And I think too, you said, though you gave a good little monologue there about like seeing the road in front of you. But I think the reason you think like that is because you're a high capacity leader. You can see so far ahead. So you see all the work to be done. It's this gap versus gain I always talk about and teach on. But talk about that, how you see so far ahead, but how do you stop yourself from, this actually goes into what we were going to talk about before we had to get up, the shadow side. Because your strength is, you can see far ahead, you see the pitfalls and everything, but your shadow side is, I know you can just stare at the pitfall and you'd be like, we're going to fall off the cliff. Yeah. So how do you balance that?
Yeah, definitely a shadow side or a weakness to that strength is, for me in particular, how it plays out with my personality, temperament, all that, my experience, is I am very futuristic and goal-oriented. And that's great, having a plan, preparing. I was just listening to something recently talking about like we don't rise to the occasion, but we fall in our level of training or preparedness. And that usually comes from like a military context. And I've taken that to heart in the sense of I want to be prepared and ready for whatever God has for us. And being able, and a personal value that I have is stewardship and responsibility and wanting to continue to develop and grow in that. And so I can take extreme ownership sometimes or responsibility of my life to where the weakness of that is I think I'm in control, to where I put too much value on what I can achieve or make happen or what I can see for the future and want to point myself or my family or the church that I work at in that direction to where I have influence. And so it's a balance, and it's an experience of learning and failing forward of like, we're moving into 2024. And so we had a calendar planning meeting as a staff like a couple weeks ago, and my 2024 calendar is completely done. Like I know by and large, probably 90% of what I'm going to be doing next year. But for me, I've learned to work that as a strength, to have vision, to be future-oriented and goal-oriented so that I can actually see progress made. But then at the same time, it's like now that I have my 2024 planned out, okay, God, this is what I have put on paper. This is what I would like to see happen. How do you want to use this? How do you want to change this? How do you want me to be as I'm actually executing and doing these things? And for me, what I've learned is if I can actually prepare and plan and think about the future, it actually, for me, it helps me be more present because I know hopefully kind of what's coming or the direction that I'm wanting to go, to where I'm not just thinking about only, okay, yeah, we're here enjoying this conversation, but what am I doing after this? Or what am I doing tomorrow? Or like, I don't know. So like, I got to figure that out. Yeah. Like now that I have a couple steps ahead of me planned, and thankfully I have the resources and ability to do that, I can be here and my phone's off and I'm here with you. Yeah, because I know by and large, like tomorrow I'm getting on a plane and I'm going to Denver, and I know what I'm going to do for the next 5 days. And I know what I'm going to do until the end of the month. And I know I have an idea of what I want to do next year. And so the strength is being able to look ahead, but that helps me actually be rooted in the present. And that's something that I've worked on. But again, the downside of the weakness to that can be control. And what I hope to happen, I actually make an expectation to where I can be disappointed when I don't see it go the way that I want. Wow. Yeah. So learning to manage expectations, be aware of them, communicate them, see if people actually agree to them. Because sometimes I can put expectations on others that they're not even aware of or that we haven't agreed to that aren't realistic. And that's unfair. And so and the side of that is, again, going back to the, one handful on what I hope God is going to do as we move into the future and the vision that I feel like he's given me in the area that I have influence, but then also open. And I feel like, for me personally, I can be more open when I have an idea of what's coming. So I feel like sometimes there's this false dichotomy. It's like, either you're overly a preparer and planner, or you're a free spirit and only live by spontaneity. And for me, I've done both, and I've lived at the extremes of both. You're kind of talking about like the chaos of which God brought me out of. But then early on in following Jesus, I was known as like the adventure guy who would just go off and do whatever, whenever, however, and really had no plan. And that was cool. But I think for me, like I was starting to grow out of that as I was taking on more responsibility. Being now a leader and a husband, could be wrong, but I think Katie appreciates knowing that she has a husband who's thoughtful, intentional, cares about what we're doing for date night in 2 weeks when I'm back, and has an idea for how we're going to manage what God has given us from a financial perspective, career perspective, relational perspective, our relationship. I think she appreciates that. And then that gives us freedom. Like, hey, we have these things that we want to do, but this has come up. Can we do that? And now that I know, like, I'm going to be here, I'm not going to be here, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm not doing, I can actually be more open to those spontaneous moments. So for me, it's learning that I think for me, I created a false dichotomy. And we see that even in a church context sometimes. It's like, oh, the Spirit's moving, so we went all night.
Yeah.
Like, well, the Spirit can still move and you can hit your service time and be
time.
done in an hour still. So you can, the Spirit can be moving and you go beyond what you plan for, and knowing how to facilitate that and be present to it. Because at the end of the day, I hope that's what we want, is that we encounter God in a real way.
Yeah.
To where if he decides, hey, we're going to hang out in this for a moment and go beyond our hour time, great. But then also, he can still move in an hour and it be another normal Sunday or service or whatever.
I wish we need to like get this where we can look stuff up immediately, but my favorite revival.
We need a Jamie.
Yeah. We'll have a Chad, another Chad. My favorite revival, it's called the Businessman Revival. And it happened right before the Wall Street fall. I'm not even going to attempt to say the year, but basically this guy got radically saved. He was on Wall Street, and then he started working at a church. So he started a Bible study, and it was 90 minutes. It was an hour, literally an hour. And he said, come during time. It's from noon to 1. And 35 minutes in, no one was showing up. And then at 40, he had like 9 guys show up. And then it kept going, but it went on for a long time. Thousands of people changed Wall Street, management, business. People got saved. Like there's a lot of things that overflowed from it, but it literally had ground rules. You walk in, it's an hour. We're going to pray, read this. We're going to do this. And then we're out. Like we're not going long. And it was like, boom. It was a revival, but it wasn't how you would think to go back to the time and the yelling and the screaming and whatever. It was just like super organized, super structured, but it was a revival because it revived the people to what God was doing. And I'm like, man. So what that means is you can have revival in a service, you can have revival in a meeting, in a podcast, and in stuff that's timed and planned. Like you literally can have God revive you into what's happening. And it doesn't have to be an emotional experience. Because I think something that we do in charismatic church world that's very unfortunate is we label people's encounter of God based on their emotional response, or we label their depth of maturity based on their emotional response or articulation of God. The problem with that is you get a lot of people that look good on the outside, but they're whitewashed tombs, not in the sense of they're going to hell, but in the sense of there's not depth. Like we need to work on that, And but I just love that revival. I think it's so good. Yeah. But to go back to what we're talking about, the shadow side, I appreciate you sharing that. I think it's great. I think for me, there's tons of strengths and weaknesses I'm aware of, but one like I've really grown in is I'm a very driven person. I'm very passionate. And in that passion, there's 2 big weaknesses I have. Number one, if I'm not careful, like the wheels can come off, I can get angry and I can get snippy. And I can say things and not think through what I say. And I literally had to apologize yesterday. Like I was a complete jerk on the Myers-Briggs. I'm a JERK in that moment. So like should not have said what I said. So I had to apologize. I'm like, but I've realized my passion sometimes it comes out and then I'm driving. I'm like, I'm wanting it to become something great. Apparently lights are changing. Wanting it to become something great. And then I jump at it. Like I turn into something. So like I'm having to become more aware of that. Yeah. But then the other thing is too, because I'm driven, what I can do is when I see other people that aren't like trying to become the best themselves, being driven, like pursuit after things, then I'm almost like, what's wrong with you? Like, do you not care? Yeah. And I can judge people for not being like me or thinking like me. And so there's a fine line, so it's great what pushes me forward. But at the same time, I've got to watch that shadow side, because the shadow side can it's like Venom on Spider-Man. It can take over your strength. So you think you're strong, but it's like, no, you're not. Like you're actually like functioning out of brokenness. And that brings damage. Like we know you can hurt people.
Yeah.
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 And
And I think like developing self-awareness
yeah.
has been incredibly helpful for me, and like actually accessing to tools and different exercises to help you become aware of your whole self.
So what does that look like? Like, what are those?
So for me, that's like personality test. You can pick your flavor of the month, whatever one you want to do.
I love them.
Like, and because of the school that we went to and the church that we were at, like we were in a leadership culture that highly valued those. And so for me, there was a point in time that I kind of became very dismissive of them because I was just tired of taking so many. It's like you have the animal personality test. It's like a lion, beaver. You got Myers-Briggs. You got Enneagram.
Otter, golden retriever. Yep.
All that
Enneagram,
stuff.
Strength
Finder.
Dude, I know it all.
And so there was a while when I was first exposed to it, really loved it. And then for a little bit, like I mentioned, became dismissive. But then realized for me, if I'm being really honest, like 2019, 2020, living in Arkansas, I noticed for me, I would wake up in the morning, generally pretty early, have coffee, sit at the desk, and I'd start reading my Bible. And for me, it's either going through a book or a devotional, whatever, and then read a book is how I'd do it, and then spend some time in prayer. So I would close my Bible. Katie would wake up, come out into the kitchen or the living room area, and my immediate disposition towards her was frustration or like, why are you inconveniencing me? Even though it's a shared space.
Yeah.
But that was just my general disposition towards her. And there was nothing that she did to warrant that. And so I just noticed in me, like, okay, I'm reading about love, or becoming a person of love, or denying yourself, serving other, loving your neighbor. If you're married, your first neighbor is your wife or your spouse, you know, and my first neighbor was just waking up and coming out into our living room to say good morning and just wanting a hug and a kiss. And I'm like, why are you bothering me?
That's so good.
You know?
That's
and so
good.
So like I realized there was something happening deeper down that I don't know if I was afraid to go to or just was unaware of, but was starting to affect our relationship and how we were relating to one another, that doing more of an exegesis on a text or a verse by verse, chapter by chapter book study is helpful in my framework and understanding of the importance of God's word and how that changes me in my mind, in my body, in my relationship. But actually I need skills as well.
That's good.
And emotional intelligence and other things in addition to that to help me. Just reading, for me in that moment, reading more about love in the Gospels wasn't helping me just become a person of love because I read about it. And so for me, that kind of took me on a journey through different influences and traditions in Christianity to kind of dig a little bit deeper, go inward, understand what's actually one way of explaining it. Pete Scazzaro has a book called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. He's been super helpful. Is exploring the iceberg. So with an iceberg, you see the tip of it above the water, but then most of it is actually underneath and not exposed. And so how do you actually get underneath the surface and bring to the surface what's happening inwardly? And for me, I didn't do emotions. My family didn't do emotions. Again, I grew up kind of in a dysfunctional family system, and my mom and sister were super tight. And so for me, I didn't really have someone to process anger, fear, frustration, sadness, or even joy with, by and large. Yeah. Especially as I was growing and becoming more of a man. And so realized there was a big part of me that was just turned off. And being an achiever and performer, it's like, I'll just work my way out of this. Or it doesn't really matter what you feel, it matters what you do. And what you can accomplish. And so I'll just stuff what I'm feeling by adding on more things that I've done to show that I have what it takes, or I'm smart, I'm competent, I'm capable, look at me, whatever. But that got me only so far. And like in the recovery world, there's a phrase that it works until it doesn't work. It only works for so long until the wheels start falling off, like you mentioned. And so for me, that again just took me on a journey of like, okay, Jesus knows who we are. knows our minds, knows our body, knows our hearts, knows our wills, knows our experiences, knows us and has created us and has designed us and has given us these things as a gift. So how do I explore them in a way, in a healthy way that connects me more to him and to others? Because at the end of the day, Jesus kind of simplified it for us and said, love God and love people. And so it's like, how do I actually not just read about that, but begin to integrate that and live that out and become a person of love, a person who loves Jesus and loves others. And so, again, went inward, exploring emotions, feelings, the kind of the dark side or the shadow side of that. And then from that journey and hitting a wall and walking through challenges, you're then able to operate out of knowing yourself fully, good and bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Black and white, but also all of this gray space that makes up who we are and that we're incredibly complex people. Being able to explore that honestly and openly, now I feel like I'm able to share from that more of a depth or realness, that I'm okay in sharing my faults, my weaknesses, my failures, and I'm not going to lose who I am or who I hope you see me as. Because there's more of an, for me at least, more of an assurance and confidence in who I am, good and bad, in the way that Jesus has designed me. So that's been really helpful. So now I've gone back to the personality tests, the Myers-Briggs, the Enneagram, the strengths and all that, and being able to understand more of who I am so I can understand God more through how he's made me.
I love it.
And connect with people.
Dude, that right there is so profound. And that's why I love those tests. For me, it transformed my life, and it transformed my way I function with Jesus. I realize through that I have what I call Peter Pan syndrome. It's the boy who never wants to grow up. Like I never wanted to deal with bad, sad things. And I would just always go to the next high, emotional high, and just people. And it's funny because when I isolate, I don't physically isolate, but I mentally isolate. Like up here, like outside, everything's fine. I'm running the meetings, I'm meeting people, I'm doing dinners. Like I'm out, life of the party. Yeah. But up here, I've checked out, bro. Like I can go on autopilot and just, it's very unique to watch myself. But what I realized through these tests was what I was doing that was like detrimental to me, but also to my soul and my relationship with Jesus. And so I began to have the hard conversations with myself and go to counseling and like all kinds of stuff. And I was like, wow, I discovered a more beautiful side of who God made me to be, but also those gifts of my personality I didn't realize. I was like, wow. And for me, my emotions, I'm a very emotional person, but how that functions is in empathy for people and wanting to be an includer of people, like a gatherer. And so how I gather is not, hey, come to my thing. It's, hey, who are you? What's unique about you? And then how does that fit into what I'm building or doing? Not to serve me, but to serve you. Because it's like, if I can discover your purpose in this, ultimately it feedbacks into giving you a greater purpose. You know, there's so many things about like how our church is wired, but that's just how I live my life. I'm like, how do you fit into my life? Okay, and now that you're here, how does my life propel you into the next degree? Like, I want people to be better because they encounter me. Like, I want them to be like, hey, I met Chancellor, and my life drastically changed because of what he added to my life. And I don't need anything from it. I just want to value people by creating that value. So it makes me think about people's individual stories. And then being a hospice chaplain, that took it to another deeper level of like how I think about people. But what all the personality tests did that was really huge was it taught me how to work with other people. I'll never forget, I'm talking to Jacqueline one time, and I'm like, hey, how does your brain work? And she's like, what? I was like, so like you, like, I was like, I think in like pictures and movies, and I feel emotions. I was like, how do you think? She's like, oh, I think in like bullet point lists. And in my mind, I was like, that's the worst thing ever. But then I was like, that's so many things make sense. And then I went on a journey where this year I'm really discovering more. When I think about things, I think in pictures and movies. So the problem is now I have to figure out how to translate that into actual words. So like I'll have this whole movie play out in my head and I'm like, yep, that's what needs to happen. But now I have to go, oh, I got to explain this.
Yeah, how do you communicate?
And then what I've learned in the last 6 months is my brain sometimes, the movie will get going faster than the words can come out. And that's when I'll mix up my words or I'll go literally like talking dyslexic. I'll change the letters, and then I'm like, okay, so I'm having to learn pacing of like playing the film in my head and communication. It's a very unique dynamic. I could go for hours talking about it because I've been studying it. But the personality side is I learned, okay, this is how this person communicates, but this is what this can mean for them. So it's like, all right, how do I work? And then you bring that into a team dynamic where you figure out, okay, how do we build a culture of a team? How's it successful? How do we work in a way that's honoring to each other, but also it's going to offend certain people? And like, how do we create these safe spaces? And also, how do we create healthy conflict? And just all this. But that's what those gifts bring to the table.
Yeah.
And they're literally life transformative.
Yeah.
There's a word there that I'm not using, but the picture in my head looks good.
I'm trying not to like suggest too many books and all that stuff.
Dude, suggest them all.
But one that was super helpful and informative as I'm trying to help people in our church change and how do you actually change and a theory of change. One book that was really helpful is this book called The Other Half of Church. And it's kind of looking at like your left brain, right brain, and how with good intention, what we sometimes do in discipleship or trying to help people change is just we'll give them more information. And so we become that caricature of a Bible thumper, to just read more of your Bible, pray more, read more books, more podcasts, more sermons, and because you have more information, you'll change. And it's
good.
It's not true. It's part of it.
Yeah. No, I see where this is going though. This is
but there's a whole other side of it that's actually connected to relationships and group identity and seeing we're designed for human connection and mirroring each other. And so if you want to actually change, yes, read books and podcasts and get more information that can help you become aware and desire that thing. But then there's this gap in actually incorporating a behavior or a habit to create sustainability in that change. Yeah. So you have that gap from awareness through a sermon, book, podcast, whatever, conversation, actually desiring it and seeing that like I want to become that or I want to do that. You have this gap because then most of the time we stop there. You actually when it goes back to the whole community connection and friends. You actually have to get in the environment and be around other people that are doing that thing, and you'll begin to mirror the way that they act, the way that they think, the way that they talk, and that helps you in what they call, in the authors of that book, full brain discipleship. And so we want to do both of those things. We want to, yes, we love the word and we love the gospel, and as leaders and teachers and preachers and communicators, like we want to communicate the message that we believe in most, which is the message of Jesus. But that alone, thinking if we give our people more information is going to help them change, actually can hurt or hinder them if we only focus on one side of it. And so we want to give people information, but not just, and even Paul talks about like knowledge can puff us up, give us a larger ego, but doesn't necessarily help us become a person of love. And that's the goal. And so it's like, yeah, more information for sure, but in the context of community, of relationship, of, hey, you, again, going back to your thing, you need help in finances? We'll get around. I had a friend tell me once that don't ever take money advice from a person who's homeless, because they probably don't have any money. And it's kind of a crude joke, but like I get the reality of that is like,
well, it's like people that want to give you marriage advice and they're single, they're on their third marriage.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, how do you live a great life and you're 18 and you haven't been on your own, you still live with your parents, you know? It's like you might have some good knowledge, but
the TikTok wisdom, all the people that have, real estate wisdom, financial wisdom, it's like, bro, you've been on this world less than 40 years. It's like, okay.
Yeah, you should probably live it out for a little bit longer.
Old people. Give me the Dave Ramsey.
Yeah.
I want that Dave Ramsey wisdom.
Yeah, dude.
I love it.
But yeah, that's the whole thing. Is like you want to get around people as well that you can begin to model how they live their life, and that will actually help you change because it gives you accountability and encouragement. It gives you another person to actually do it with. Yeah. So that's where I leave that.
It's good, man. It's the power of life, collaboration. Well, you're someone fun to do life with. Appreciate. Love you so much.
Yeah, dude.
You're an amazing person. I wouldn't be who I am without you. You make me better. And so
No.
I'm excited to continue to go on the journey of life, crush you at basketball occasionally. I will crush you at racquetball tonight.
You probably will, dude. I was trying to think back of the last time I played racquetball, and it's probably at Evangel in college.
Oh, dude, so great. Now, Pastor David, he's dangerous. He'll hurt us tonight. But before we have that moment, we're going to go eat, maybe do a kettlebell workout. We'll figure it out. But love you. If people want to connect with you, what can they do?
Come find me in person.
Where do they go currently? Stuart?
Yes. Yeah, Stuart. Church that I work at is called TC3.
Yeah.
But, I don't have any
you don't have social media. You don't have anything.
And I'm not giving you my cell phone
so you're a
number.
gym. Yeah, so if people find you, be looking at the mall. He just may be around the corner. Love you, bro.
Love you too, man. Thank you.
Love you, friends. Thanks for watching.